Welcome to AI for Business Leaders podcast. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of AI for Business Leaders. I am the founder and CEO of The Other Group, a strategic advisory firm that partners with commerce and AI technologies to unlock revenue opportunities and solve go-to-market challenges. With- Today, we're diving into how business leaders can actually leverage AI with somebody who I've known for a while, I can call a friend as well, Matt Dornfeld. And Matt has spent over a decade inside the commerce ecosystem, rising from strategic account management at Skubana to leading global partnerships as Feedonomics, and now running AI go-to-market strategy for commerce, formerly known as BigCommerce. He was on the M&A team that acquired Feedonomics for commerce. He created Omni Certified Partner program from scratch, scaling to 250 plus partner with significant referral ARRs. He managed partnerships across Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, TikTok, and on and on and on and on. And I can go on with his accolades. Lastly, his LinkedIn handle is Matt/GPT. So which tells you how deeply he identifies with AI and also commerce intersections. So very excited to have you, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And I might take you around to future podcast openings. It was a great introduction. So it was, definitely hit on a lot of the highlights. And I think to your point, the rebrand to Matt GPT has gone pretty well. I've got that Slack handle as well. So it's been pretty good as far as internal branding goes.
Awesome. Go add the SEOs and the AEOs and GEOs and all the O's.
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe we can start with just your career arc. It is very interesting to me, sort of looking through it. You have a really interesting path with that commerce ecosystem, right? Like I mentioned from Skubana, where you were working with brands like Death Wish Coffee and back office operations to building entire partnership motion to Feedonomics and now AI. So walk us through a little bit in terms of like what's that connecting thread between all these moves, and is there a certain common problem you're just keep coming back to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. I've had a number of different careers. I started in public relations before all the ecom tech stuff, and then also had a quick detour and lived in Cuba where I was a tour guide, and then came back and then found my way into tech. So I've definitely lived a few different lives, and I'd say for me the journey, you know, we're all motivated by a number of different things. Money is obviously one of them, but for me, achievement and performance have always been really core to things that I care about. And so when I looked at e-commerce and it's back in 2017, 2018, I remember thinking to myself, this is an industry I could really sink my teeth into, learn something, and become hopefully as close to an expert in my own right. Skubana definitely afforded me that opportunity to really meet with brands of all sizes and really get under the hood around how do the wheels turn here? Like what generates success? How do these brands do it? And what I realized is that it all comes down to their operations and how they're set up internally to drive external outcomes. And so that story continued as I made my way to BigCommerce. You initially came in on the partner side and led our initial relationships with eBay and Amazon, those types, and eventually moved into Feedonomics and built that partner program to what it is. And then more recently, to your point, on the AI front, and all at the same time, AI, go-to-market performance, all that stuff really comes back to achievement. Really, how do we do our work? How do we do it in the best way possible? And how do we deliver a really outsized outcome for our clients or our teams? And so for me, it was just this internal, drive around constantly wanting to be better, and retail just happened to be the topic. And so I'd say even now, like my interests are definitely expanding beyond retail, but I'm finding the use cases as I network with other people are very similar. The problems are very similar, but the how we're approaching it, it still tends to vary quite a bit. And I think that's where the fun is, of course, in a lot of what we're touching.
Yeah, that's I can definitely resonate with that. So I think if I could even distill it down to, you know, using another word for achievement, it's almost like your growth mindset, that you just the curiosity, and also you use the word fun, which I think is fantastic, especially for people who just like to learn, who likes to achieve. Fun also means discovery. It means learning new areas, sort of just, stitching different things together, connecting the dots from interdisciplinary approaches. Sounds like that's also, part of your story.
Totally. And yeah, I think, what I like to find people, unsurprisingly, like myself, that have, bias to action. And AI is, I mean, we're just in I said this to you the other day, like we're kind of in a
Yeah,
place where we have maybe the coolest, most helpful, wild discovery since fire. And,
yeah,
that is worth, wrapping all of your time around. Like I look at this and I look what it could mean for the future of work. And I think it can be scary for sure for
mhm,
parties or folks that are unwilling to accept change. But for anyone willing to embrace it and lean in, which I've chosen to do personally, I think the upside just from a educational grounds alone is incredible. Like we've truly, I've never seen anything like it in my career, and I'm really looking forward to the changes that come basically every day at this point.
yeah, yeah, 1000% agree. We're gonna get to the AI topic, but before that, BigCommerce became Commerce last July, right? And that's a bold move. We're all in the ecosystem, so we all agree that when you're essentially claiming the category name, that's just it's a huge, huge sort of decision. So from the inside, what was that sort of logic? And for leaders listening to who may be evaluating platforms, what does the rebrand actually signal about where the company's headed? Along with perhaps AI is part of that decision criteria.
For sure. Yeah, I think we were formerly BigCommerce, had the Big C ticker, and I was here pre-IPO and have been here almost 6 years now. I think the core point is that formerly BigCommerce was acquisitive and acquired a lot of great platforms, right? We acquired Feedonomics, we acquired MakeSwift. There were B2B pieces along the way as well. And ultimately where we landed is that we are an ecosystem player, right? We partner with our competitors, and so calling ourselves big commerce while having growing, thriving products that are also in the same umbrella and not referencing them is a problem, right? It's a missed opportunity. And so the goal was to establish ourselves as ecosystem leaders. Yes, bold to name ourselves after the industry, but also representative of what we offer, right? We have several core products that address a number of key challenges for brands that are or manufacturers that are looking for new storefronts, that are looking for new ways to show up on new channels, that are looking to take better and more thoughtful control of their visual appearance, right, and their user experience on their websites, and similarly, have better B2B experiences. And that's a very wide spectrum. Boiling that down into a singular sentence, it can be challenging unless you broaden the definition of what you represent. And I think for us, where we landed with the rebrand is that we needed to think bigger, much bigger, in order to capture the value that is all of these products combined and then threading them together with the right clients at the right times to deliver the most value. So yes, bold, but perhaps overdue. Those acquisitions happened over several years. And so I think ultimately we have so many stories to tell internally. We have clients that sit on Shopify and clients that use Salesforce and Magento. And we'd love for as many of them to use BigCommerce as possible. But if they're okay and happy using Feedonomics, that's okay too. And I think that's just the industry or the state of the industry we're in that you're you're going to use different pieces of the puzzle at different times, and that's okay, even when some of them compete with each other. And we wanted to empower our clients and prospects to have that same experience.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think there's just a lot of choices out there these days compared to back in the days, right? So
Yeah.
on one end, that's certainly a beneficial thing for brands and customers. On the other hand, that's why it's important to have experts who help and assist in terms of evaluating what does that tech stack look like? What's the most optimal solutions? And it's always a fine balance between quantity, quality, as well as what syncs up with what from a tool standpoint. Your CEO, Travis, has said product discovery begins with a prompt, not a homepage. And so if we can unpack that a little bit for the leaders out there who are hearing a lot about AI buzz and but are not sure what actually, they should do about it. In your opinion and your terminology, what is agentic commerce? And how is commerce building for a world where ChatGPT, Gemini, and Geminis are going to be the new storefronts?
So I don't think we're totally sure where this is going to end. I think anyone that claims they completely understand is maybe overreaching a little bit. Although there are a lot of strong opinions, and we certainly have our own as well. In general, I think what Travis's point is, and what a lot of folks are thinking and working on is how do we meet customers where they are.
Hmm.
That statement should sound super familiar because we've said it over and over for decades. And all that we've done is introduce a new way for products to be discovered. Now, it's a
Hmm.
phenomenal new way, right? It's a very different way than we've always done it. But at its core, what does ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, what do these channels need? Well, they need product data and they need partnerships and they need
Hmm.
context and they need checkout feasibility and accessibility. And that's what, large partners like Stripe and PayPal are also working to figure out, which is how do we power the rails that enable someone to both discover a thing on ChatGPT and then similarly check out wherever they choose to check out. What has to be figured out in the agentic commerce space is, well, we have these different components that need to talk to each other. We have the product data going to
Hmm.
one place, we have the checkout rails happening somewhere else. And so I think what we'll continue to see is that the way brands deliver an experience will continue to evolve. So they might discover a product in one place, but they might come to the DC, let's say, to have a very particular and distinct brand experience. And we've already seen this today. There are a number of examples of this globally, even prior to agentic commerce being more common, which is, do you look at brick and mortar retail locations as simply a place that you transact, or do you look at them as wholly brand owned experiences that may lead to a sale, but may also just completely swarm your customer with the hug that is Nike or Canada Goose or
Hmm.
whatever. And so I think agentic commerce will fall into one of those channels and one of those audience types, which is to say, if I'm going to ChatGPT, I'm going there for convenience and I'm going there because I feel like I can have a conversation with this experience and then have it respond to me with something that I want. In the future state, we'll see our preferences start to inform our searches. So as I start to teach this model, will it begin to recommend things to me? And then will I enable checkout to happen right in that place as well, based on where I like to shop, how often I like to shop there, the things I like to search, and so forth. Did you happen to see the Super Bowl ads about Claude and
I
ChatGPT?
did. Yeah.
What did you think of those?
I thought those were fantastic. I thought the stories were, a lot of people talked about it was they're basically taking a swipe on OpenAI on their advertising. I didn't look at it that way. I think advertising to me, and this may be an unpopular opinion, I think advertising is much needed. I think when done right, it brings a lot of benefits to a lot to consumers and customers, especially in the world that we're talking about when it comes to context, the importance of it. But going back to your question, what did I think about the ad? I think it was fantastic. I think the way they did it was, one, they really signal that at the end of the day, that humans are still there in the central sort of aspect of how they think about building products. And by that, I mean, they could have used AI to produce those advertisements, but they didn't, right? They use humans to do it. And that put them in the center of the conversation, like how AI may replace humans. And also, I thought it was really tastefully done. I think, yeah, from an advertising angle, I thought that was fantastic. So is that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for there's some people, if you haven't watched it, forever is watching this later, and there's a series of ads where Claude is basically poking fun at OpenAI for introducing ads to their LLM. And the idea being that, if I'm regularly searching for, a path to getting a six pack in a week, that maybe I should be targeted with certain kinds of protein powder or other things because it's highly contextual, it's highly personal. And it would appear to be that I'm ready to make a purchase. And so I think ads, no ads, we can go back and forth on all of that. But I think at the end of the day, we're clearly seeing search volume happen on these LLMs, just as they happened on Google or other channels. And so, what does that mean for the future of the storefront? I think we're still figuring that out, which is,
Hmm.
what role does that
Hmm.
evolve into in the future? And we don't have a complete answer, but I know that at least from our camp, we are trying to empower our clients to transact and do business, do commerce wherever it makes sense to do commerce. And that might require certain pieces of our tech stack and not all of them. And I think that's the challenge that people will also have with like Shopify's model, which is very guarded around its checkout experience. And it's done on purpose because a major chunk of its revenue comes from payments volume. So I think if you're a business fan and you like watching, the battle play out, this is about to get really fun because it's so critical to how we, at least in America, as a consumer heavy country, like this is going to change everything about how people transact, where they transact, who they choose to work with and who they don't. Even the fee structure, I think with Shopify is going up. If you transact through ChatGPT, it's going to be very expensive to a brand. And that's going to be another thing for them to think about, which is to what extent is that traffic worth it? Can I afford that margin cut, which is
Hmm.
more than I need to see, in order to enable it. So I think at the end, there's a lot that has yet to play out. I think we're still
Hmm.
quite, despite what feels like in many cases we're not. But as far as wide scale adoption goes, I think OpenAI and Perplexity neither reported out significant revenue from advertising or other forms. And so I think that's just a signal that the insanity is yet to come, and we're
Yeah.
about to see a lot of change happen right before our eyes.
Right, right. I do agree. And also, right now, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about just the OpenAI advertising as well. Right now, obviously, just sort of the phase one, right? That's banner ads and it's search ads. So really, like, in a way, search ads do work, and Google is a prime example of that. But to me, that's not the best advertising experience. Meta actually has a very good sort of advertising experience in terms of I'm just not being shown ads where I'm looking for the product already. Like in a way, it's like, what's the point of that? But I also get it. It does actually work. And I think just from you're talking about from platform perspective and also like foundational model perspective, Gemini and also Google, they have all the data, right? Even compared to ChatGPT and OpenAI, they have the product data, they have the search data, they have like conversion data and everything else. Like they've been built on Google Shopping for the longest time. I would guess and assume they probably have a leg up when it comes to like shopping and e-commerce. But as you know,
Mhm.
it all comes down to execution. So we'll see.
Totally.
We'll see who
Totally. I
wins.
mean, it's so interesting about Google too, right? Because they've had obviously a stranglehold on search for,
Hmm.
and now the thing they haven't succeeded at is like Google as a transacting channel, right? Google Wallet isn't necessarily, or Google Pay is not necessarily like a top wallet out there by volume perspective, or volume overall. And then similarly, you have Google Marketplace and other things that just haven't really taken off. Now, that's not to say that they're in trouble or anything. It just means that that's just not something they've really crushed in the same way. And to where you're going, they have incredible distribution, like next level distribution across a number of very valuable properties. And so as a business person, the way I work with Gemini, I mean, one of my favorite AI forward, products right now is the Gemini suite. There's
Mm.
so much goodness in what they provide to enterprise users that, you'd be silly not to try it and not to try to find ways to incorporate it into your day to day. And I regularly do, both for my personal and professional lives. I think there's so much upside to plugging these things into your day to day.
Yeah. So admittedly, I haven't tried the Gemini suite, but I do need to check it out. I use Claude Code almost 90% of the time. So I do need to
Still a
check it
great
out.
choice. Still a
Yeah,
great choice.
yeah. Let's take a little pivot a little bit. You're doing a lot of interesting stuff right now. So you're leading the global AI GTM, right? That's literally just go to market for AI products. So if you can just talk a little bit about it and share it to the audience, because I'm sure a lot of organizations are all at the place where they're trying to figure out who's going to lead charge of AI initiatives and what does that process look like all the way, let's just say very beginning stage of sort of change management, enablement, and all these things down to picking the AI stacks to deployments and testing. Love to kind of for you to share a little bit of experience from what you know and just anything you're able to share publicly.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Around mid-year last year, our chief revenue officer plucked me out of the sales management track and asked me to just report directly to him, and jumped at that opportunity. So in that role, I took over our AI go-to-market strategy. So a lot of folks, especially in e-com land, when you hear AI, you probably assume features, which is like, what tool or feature will I make available to a client who then pays us for that thing. My role is much more akin to like the go-to-market engineering has become a more hot topic. It's kind of buzzy. I'd say I'm pretty close to that arena, which is my job is to evaluate new AI tools for commerce as a business to use internally. It's to implement those tools. It's to build enablement programs and strategies to get people to use it and to basically enable building on top of this process. So my general philosophy on AI tooling is that we want to embed as much enablement and smart workflows into the ways that people work today and the ways they prefer to work, which is a quick way to accelerating adoption, but also performance. In the sales side, it's very common for people to flip between 2, 4, 6, 10, 20 different tabs before they do outreach about anything. And then similarly, there are a lot of AI tools out there or AI SDRs that will enable one-to-many smart sounding spray and praise. The challenge with that is a lot of companies are starting to do that. So there's a lot of sounding the same going on right now too.
More
So
spraying and more praying, but never got
yes,
answers.
lots of prayers for sure. And I think for me, when I think about one, like how do we get here, and how do I use that path to propel me forward? I think where I landed was that first, I had to centralize where our go-to-market data lives. We needed a unified view of all the things related to any sort of exchange with a prospect, client, or partner. We took our tech stack and then we centralized that into our sources of truth, which for us is primarily Snowflake and Salesforce. And then similarly introduced some additional agentic tooling to power really a brain functionality. So the idea here is that, you know, across your book, if you've got 60,000, 100,000 accounts spread across a bunch of sellers and all these different departments globally, there are infinite signals that might indicate whether someone is ready to have a conversation or not. And it's very hard for sellers to digest that information at scale all the time. That's why we have top A plus players and levels down. But even for them, it's a lot. And what we've started to think through is, well, how do we reason through what signals are noise really, or actually true signal to suggest taking a step? And then how do we empower our sellers to take action on those things? And so we've been working on introducing a new platform to basically reason through all of the signal data we collect across our entire go-to-market stack. And then we align those signals to our target accounts, our key messages, new product features, our ICP, you name it. And then we proactively suggest to our sellers what the suggested next best action would be for outreach. And then if they agree with that recommendation, all from within Slack, they just press a button and that will trigger an automatic cadence, sounds like them, map to how they like to talk and write and communicate overall, map by region. US talks different than British English, is different than Aussie English. And then we're powering these cadences over and over. So that way we are providing as much relevant and timely value to whoever we're targeting at any given time. And we're enabling these people to move really, really quick because they're now equipped with this rocket, on their backs to actually help them communicate at scale in a much better way. So for us, it's just been a lot of data architecture, a lot of whiteboarding, and finally we're starting to really plug things in. So we're looking at so many interesting use cases already, and one of them is an agentic seller as well.
Mhm.
But before I go down that path, questions about kind of how we've set things up?
No, this is fantastic. I think one question I have, and this is it's a very clear plan that you have mapped out. I'm just wondering, how long did it take you guys to get to the where you are right now, to the point that you're testing tools out?
Yeah, great question. I'd say we did things kind of the hard way in that, we're also in mid-process migrating between CRMs and some other larger tech activities. And so if we stripped out those requirements, we'd probably maybe just over a quarter roughly to start from where I started to actually flipping things on. But because we
That's
had
still
that
pretty
going on,
fast.
probably, yeah, for sure.
That's still pretty quick.
So I'd say, with the delays or, other competing priorities, probably a bit longer, closer to one half. But yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, pretty fast for a public company and all the teams we have to navigate. But I think the hidden tripwire for a lot of people is GRC, like privacy, security, governance. Like those are people you want to make friends with really, really quickly and early in your process. So, shout out to those folks. The big companies just have different risk profiles than small companies. And so if you're a small business, you might be more willing to eat some risk on certain kinds of data you acquire or how you acquire it. Bigger companies with SOX compliance and PII concerns and all that, the math is different. And so inherently, we meet delays just because we have to be careful.
Right, right. Understandably so. Was there any aspect of that transition or new process you guys are building that was actually easier than what you had anticipated?
Yeah, one thing I noticed is that, and I had never looked into this prior, but a lot of vendors do enable you to port your data out.
Okay.
So if you're,
Sure.
if you're a Snowflake client, as an example, you could do a data share from Gong to Snowflake. And what that allows for you is do a massive dump of data into Snowflake and basically make it very simple to extract and play with that information that's available on the back end of Gong. I think where we will see this evolve to, and we're working on this too, which is how do we take that a step further to enable more of an MCP experience, which is so a modal context protocol. And the idea there is for your viewers, generally speaking, the idea is that you've got an MCP server. It functions much like a USB cable where you're translating two very different sets of systems and suites of APIs. And you've got this protocol that helps translate all of that at scale. If you think about that in the go-to-market context, that means once we install this, we'll be able to much more naturally and freely query and marry up different data sets with Gong and our intent platform and our enterprise account management platform and so forth. And so the way tech is evolving, assuming MCP is the path, we just needed to make sure we centralize data as cleanly as possible. Some vendors definitely made it easier than others. And I think that's when you're just doing discovery and trying to figure out how do I go about doing this, actively talk to your partners about what you're trying to do and diagram it out. Because I found that without a diagram, heads just, they wander. And so it's much
Sure.
easier to centralize people and kind of set the North Star vision and then work backwards from that with whatever tech requirements or constraints you have.
Right, right. And funny enough, as you were talking through this, and I think this becomes once again sort of the old sort of SaaS problems, right? In terms of when you have a revenue team, you have sort of the tech stacks of different vendors you're working with. Everybody's working in silos, but who's basically in charge in terms of setting that sort of centralized architecture? And right now, I guess the term right now is go-to-market engineer. It's like that person is in charge of architecting all the data flows or the tech stacks and the choices and also the measurements and so on.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'd say they're definitely a key part of it. We're
Hmm.
fortunate; we have an excellent data team, and I think data scientists play a really critical role. Data
Hmm.
architect. So find the experts in Snowflake and your cloud infrastructure, and lean on them heavily
Hmm.
because ultimately they're going to find ways to accelerate your success in ways that business people won't. And remember, I came from the background of selling and sourcing. So for me, this is a very new frontier overall, but
Hmm.
um, business outcome is something that I was able to crystallize really early because I knew why we were building what we were building. And I think that's maybe historically where some of this got lost, where more traditional operations roles, they don't necessarily have the exposure to the bag, right, or hitting a revenue target. And so I think having that as an overlay actually helped us accelerate a lot of decisions where we actually knew, no, this is what we're driving towards, and these are the decisions we have to make in order to get us there really, really fast.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think this is sort of always a hot question for people that's in partnerships on, when it comes to the question of deciding what to build in-house and what to buy. Do you have a framework or mental model, especially when it comes to something so new in AI, of deciding like what to build in-house and also what to seek the solutions from outside vendors for?
That is a very hot topic. I think
Okay.
generally,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like the build versus buy decision. And where we've generally landed is if there's something that doesn't have to be uniquely us and we're optimizing for speed, then so, as an example, the go-to-market reasoning engine, we could have stood up 10,000 SQL queries that run and, are cadence or sequenced with workflow automations, but we're probably introducing considerable complexity to meet
Hmm.
our unique table requirements. Whereas investing in a solution for, whatever six-figure contract might actually get us to a better outcome much faster because we removed some of the custom work that would otherwise trip us up later in favor of something more out of the box, more standard, and aligned to all of our security protocols. And so for in-house things though, I think that's where like workflow automations are a great place to do in-house, like build those. So fairly affordably, you can either bring on a consultant or even an automation specialist whose job is to just have, my earlier point, just have fun making things easier for people. Like, what a quick way to become everyone's favorite person. Like, you show up
Hmm.
and just make things happen faster automatically in the background. Like, I
Yeah.
would love that for my personal life. So,
No, no, no seller has ever said, I love inputting context into Salesforce.
exactly. Like, I'm sure they're out there, right? I'm sure there's one, right? But I think for us, we just think through, okay, well, these are the goals. If we work backwards from this ridiculously high target that we all want to hit, what what has to be true in order for us to do that? And that forces the conversation of like, well, we have 3 months to do this. It will take 6 months to build this thing that we believe is a dependency to unlock that target. We buy. And what we've seen out of that is for the tools we have purchased, one, especially right now, like huge shout out to my vendors who will inevitably see this. They've been excellent business partners, right? They've showed up, they're on time, they come with advice. They're smart people, they're good to work with. That's what I want in a business partner. And yes, I'm paying them, but we're investing in our joint success by leaning in now and often. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too. Like the forward deployed engineer model is just not something I've had too much exposure to prior to this role, but whoa, right? Like very different having an engineer from the vendor sit on my calls, guide us on setup, guide us on workflow, tips, whatever, incredibly valuable. And similarly, we have an automation specialist at Commerce who's great. Like that team is great at scoping projects for us and building out those workflows and those automations. And you pair those things. So now I've purchased this platform that got me, 80% of the way there. And then my automation specialist is adding the cool stuff on top that speaks to some of the custom nature of what we're trying to achieve. And suddenly we've just got this machine. And I think that's where for a pretty affordable cost, you can see excellent step change business outcomes with certain investments. And then similarly, low cost investments to kind of close the gap on wherever your teams are more special than something typically out of the box.
Yeah, that makes sense. You and I know the meaning of forward deploy engineers. And because this podcast was set up for, honestly, just business leaders day to day, sometimes they could be in tech or sometimes they may not. If you can share a little bit about like who forward deploy engineers are, what is it they do? What's the value there? And are they different than your typical sales solution engineers like from back in the days? And what's been the biggest value to you? You kind of talked a little bit about it, but if you can kind of elaborate that, I think that would be really helpful for everyone.
For sure. Yeah. So forward deployed engineers or FDEs are, I'm sure they've been around for a while, but I'd seen it's very, very common.
Palantir basically started that model, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And so now we're seeing a lot of AI native vendors lead with that as their preferred model. And so the way that plays out is you might meet your FD or a potential team of them during the sales cycle where they're helping scope out some things, answering more technical questions, kind of like a solutions architect or an engineer would do. But they don't disappear after you sign the contract. And I think that for me has been like the huge difference maker where this person that I'm working with on that reasoning engine, she is on Slack with us. She's on, today we were on 2 calls together over a course of like an hour and a half, like really spends the time to understand our business. And then like, I'm not a technical expert in her platform. So she's spending the time taking our inputs, analyzing them with AI,
Mm,
and then programming the platform to speak to the outcomes we're looking to achieve. And so for me, it's like if you're a rocket taking off from Earth, right, and you've got this booster pack, typically the booster pack falls off at some point. And I think the beauty of this is that booster pack is just hanging on, taking us further and further and further. And I'm sure at some point they will contribute less, but also we shouldn't be building new workflows all the time, right? We should just
sure.
be doing our jobs. And so
Right.
uh, it really for us, it's like extra engineering firepower, both to some degree pre-sale, but especially during onboarding and the post-sale experience where you're really trying to prove value as soon as possible so that your board feels comfortable with the investment you just, bet your career on.
Right, right. And it's highly valuable, right? Because once again, coming back to AI, it's just so new for everyone. And to understand sort of the system architecture and sort of technicality of how systems can also communicate and also internet linked, that's definitely really helpful. Let's take a little shift off away from sort of tools and technical stuff. I haven't had a conversation with some of the bigger organizations out there, and they have mentioned that tools really isn't the issue. It's there. Technology is there, right? The biggest issue, especially the bigger they are, the more complex it is within people and also process. I'm not sure if you came across that, and if you have, what's been sort of the learning that you have in terms of navigating those changes among your team.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, right? The tools exist. In fact, there's probably too many tools in many cases, and so I think one of the biggest challenges and native challenges to us is that we're still people. Until people aren't the ones doing the job anymore, there will always be these challenges. And so
Hmm.
uh, I think with any team, what we're talking about, and you brought this up, right? This is organizational change. We are massive changes to the way people do work. And, I had a conversation with someone on my team earlier today, and we were talking about how, we're actually talking about being as lean as possible and what that looks like and how do we go about achieving that. And we were having this, friendly debate around like what's strategic and what's not. And my point was if I'm able to enable you to be a completely independent one woman show, that is strategic. That is actually the most strategic thing we could possibly do as a business because now you're non reliant on anybody else. You have a one step escalation path to me as the manager, and you have all the tools and capabilities to not only do all the parts, but do it without working all day or all night to actually achieve it. And so I think the change management of getting people comfortable with something that's one, new, two,
Hmm.
could be scary. If you feel like your job could be replaced by AI, you might be right, in which case, great reason to lean in, not lean out. Uh, and so for a lot of folks, I think this is going to be a challenging moment in that the before was comfortable. Like you've lost your
We're
job, you go
used to
find,
it.
you're used to it. Yeah. You lose your job, you find another job. You have the same tools. Every company has Gmail. Every company has Gong or whatever recording software. And I think you get into this mode of, well, it's kind of the same everywhere. And now it's not, right? Now it's like this company does it this way. This company has these tools, different workflows. And suddenly you've got choice and it's exponentially, expanding. So to your question, yes, I think it's challenging. And yes, you need new processes and new forms of enablement that actually empower people to do their jobs great. And I think if you've hired for the best possible employee for your role, they should be naturally curious. They should be willing to test and iterate and think through. And if you don't have those employees or you are that person, you're thinking, am I that person? Am I not? It's a great time to take stock of where you're at and where you can improve. And I think that's the kind of person I want to hire who's
Hmm.
taking stock of where they're at and wants to make some changes. So ultimately, there will always be new tools and new flows and new things, but it's very hard to coach people to be curious. It's very hard to coach people to lean in and want to fall down sometimes and try these new things. So I tend to anchor on those things when I interview as well. I think those
Hmm.
are critical components to what builds a great team. So enabling some of that, I think, with some of your decisions and things we do is just it's a great way to bring about a great outcome for a team that's faced with new challenges.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. And it kind of reminds me of a quote somebody had told me. It was essentially, in the world of AI, everybody's B plus, meaning that the outputs from AI is all B, or it's all B plus. The question is, how do you become A or A plus? How do you do better, right? Because that's
Yeah.
sort of the level has come up with at some point it's going to be standardized across the board where everybody understands how to use AI. And that's a lot of times it's the people with growth mindset, people who are curious, who are actually experimenting and using the tool and really lean in on using it and understanding where the human components really come into play that AI may or may never be able to replace. That's where you bring the value.
Yeah,
I think those are the ones that's going to have a good long career and successful one too.
for sure. Yeah, it's like augmenting the human experience is kind of where I think we're heading into that phase. We're on the early parts of it, but I mean, just think about, I don't know about you, but like I have typically 2 to 3 different LLM tabs open at any given time.
Right.
I've got ChatGPT, I've got Claude, even right now, Gemini, one of their products, which I clearly need to talk to you more about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there's these things are now completely embedded in the way I live my personal and professional lives, and it's hard. I've seen so much that it's actually hard for me to not see it. And then I'll go talk to my parents in Florida, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't know, we just don't barely use this thing," or
Yeah. Right.
I'm just like, I must be living in a little bubble, right? Because everyone on my LinkedIn says I'm behind, and it's
That's right.
it's just a funny dynamic for where we're at with technology, where you can actually see the stark differences based on the community or social circle you engage with at a given moment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do agree. To wrap things up, If a brand leader or a tech executive is listening and thinking, hey, I need to get prepared for AI or even agentic commerce for the next 3 to 6 months, but I don't know where to start because there's just so much information out there. As you mentioned, if you just, pay attention on LinkedIn, it seems like everybody's an expert. There's so many vendors out there. If you were to give them 3 things that they should do in the next 30 days, what would those 3 things be?
I mean, data, data, data. I think the AI, like LLMs, agentic tools, they're all relying on excellent data. And the data covers a lot of ground, right? You have product data, you have order data. We were talking about our returns earlier, in that space. Like
Mhm.
there's so much information that we have access to in various disparate, disconnected parts of our business that if combined in new ways, you actually get to recognize a 1 + 1 = 10 situation with the right LLM or tooling in the middle. So I think data preparedness is a big one. Two, I think, we're seeing some fiscal years just end, some just start. I think when I think about budgeting, you really need to think through how you're going to make room for this on your balance sheet. And, it doesn't have to be a significant investment to start, but I do think carving out some either experimental budget or dedicated focus on these tools or consultants that can build things for you is going to be really critical because if you're investing, then you're hoping to see a better outcome and upside. And I've found
Sorry,
in number,
quick question on that point. What you guys were thinking through from budget standpoint, did you guys reallocate it from other functions or other budgets, or is this a brand new, OpEx item?
it was both. So
Okay.
we had some cases where we made some tool decisions, some platform decisions, and retired some tools and reduced a license count. And in other cases, we had to go find it. And so all of my requests, excuse me, internally are built on executive summaries and business requirements documents. And so those things combined with all the cross-functional buy-in help us present a case as to demonstrate why it's worth changing the way we think about budget this year to make this bet. And so I am a firm believer in business cases, and I'm sure a lot of the leaders who watch this are as well. But yeah, it's a pretty critical exercise to at least give yourself some flexibility to account for that because you don't want to be caught flat-footed and not be able to make a decision down the road, which I think is even riskier. And so, and then beyond that, I think the engagement with your partners is really critical. And I've said this in a lot of different retail settings as well, and that you're not supposed to go at this alone. There's been a lot of change to the partnerships in general in the last year in retail. Commerce has had changes. Shopify has made some pretty strong choices with how they want to handle partners in the future. And we're seeing that, we will see that play out in market. But if you're a brand or retailer or you're a technology company or whatever, you must find people that bring in new ways of thinking and challenge the status quo that you've always had. Because if not, you might go down a path that misses the whole boat on something huge. And there are a lot, it's hard because there are a lot of people out in the world claiming to know certain things or not. And I think that comes down to them proving, the value for you. But I still think it's worth doing the homework and figuring out 1, 2, 3 partners that can help you take your business to the next level, will help you build that vision that you can then
Mhm,
work backwards from and make other critical decisions. I think it's with AI, it's very hard to think linearly because it's not linear. Things are just changing
mhm,
so fast. And so
uh-huh.
instead, you can build out a North Star vision for yourself. Working backwards is always easier than working forwards. And so I just encourage my own teams and my associates in the space to think similarly.
I may be biased in this, just being somebody who's been in different type of go-to-market roles, whether sales, customer success, partnerships, marketing, and so on. I think this is a perfect time for somebody who's been in partnership positions or who has a partnership mindset, because inevitably partnerships is about ecosystem thinking. It's not linear at all. So if you're able to adopt that type of mindset, this is the part where the ambiguity really excites you versus, you know,
Yeah.
deter you or block you from moving forward. So,
Yep. Totally agree.
but
Yeah.
this has been incredibly valuable, Matt. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking
Pleasure.
us on how, one of the largest commerce platforms rebuilding the entire go-to-market, and also AI, what you're working on is extremely exciting. I'm sure a lot of people would love to, learn more about it. So for folks who want to connect with you directly, where should they go?
LinkedIn's great, super easy. Just Matt GPT on LinkedIn, and then I think similarly on Twitter or X at this point. So I love meeting people in the space who are trying to tackle these kinds of problems and challenges. I think it's incredibly exciting. And like I said earlier, there's just so much information. And so it helps, selfishly, it helps me too to have conversations with others in different verticals, different spaces, different problem sets, because it, kind of provides a different flavor to, tackling some of these challenges. And I'd be happy to share, what we're building here in greater depth as well.
Awesome. I know we talked about this before. This is where community component really come into play, right? Where we can learn from each other and just build better things going forward. So to everyone listening, if you found this valuable, subscribe to the podcast and share with other people on navigating in the intersections of AI, technology, commerce, and marketing. We're bringing on founders, investors, operators to help us understand how AI is reshaping how product is built, sold, and scale. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. To everyone listening, if you found this valuable, subscribe to the podcast AI for Business Leaders on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and leave a comment. Please also share with others navigating the future of AI. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.